Yo, how are you doing, folks? Welcome to episode 77 of the Simpa Life Podcast. It is a very wet and miserable day up here in the Northeast, and apparently also where our guest is today. Seems we share a microclimate, it would seem, because they also got the snow that we had last week, which really surprised quite a lot of us. So who knows, next week we might have tornadoes, or who knows, maybe the end of the world, the rate this weather's going. But with on sunnier horizons, slight segue there, we have a wonderful guest for you today that I've been trying to get sort of nailed down for quite a while, but I've just not really found the time to sort of reach out. It's someone that I met many years ago at the London Cannabis Film Festival, where I was invited by the team to speak on a panel. I was fortunate enough to see part of, but unfortunately not all of, Mila's journey, which is the name of the documentary, documenting the most predominant part of Mila's life. But it is a wonderful movie. If you do get an opportunity to see it, I will include it in links below. Without further ado, today's guest is, and this is quite a long one here, folks, good introduction coming up, an author, documentarian, entrepreneur, inventor, mother, old school smoker, that's what we like to hear, traveler, winner of High Times Lifetime Achievement Award, founder of the Dabadoo events, and the creator of the Café Cleo de Maroud, which is now recognized by quite a lot of people within sort of cannabis history as technically being the first coffee shop in Amsterdam, although they didn't actually sell the hash, they just gave it away. That is one way to live. With over 50 years of experience now, truly earning her title as the hash queen, she is Mila Jansen. How are you doing, Mila?
Hello there. I'm doing really well, even though it's very windy. But personally, I'm great. I'm very happy to be speaking to you. Yes, let's go ahead.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, it's something I've sort of noticed before when I've traveled to Amsterdam in the past. Like, you kind of take off in one sort of weather climate and you land in another. And so when I ring back home, folks are like, yeah, it's exactly the same. So it's quite frustrating that for all we share weather, we don't share laws. So the liberal nature of Amsterdam and being able to kind of wander around and frequent various establishments is not quite where we're at here in the UK, unfortunately.
Well, don't be mistaken. It is not legal. Marijuana is not legal in Holland. It's tolerated. So it's tolerated to be sold to customers in coffee shops, but coffee shops are technically not allowed to buy that product. So the sales to the coffee shop is illegal, and then going out of the coffee shops, it's legal. It somehow shows you the hypocrisy of the Dutch system. So it's illegal to grow. So you can get bust all the time if you grow, while the coffee shops are allowed to sell it anyway.
Yeah, big hypocrisy.
Just enjoy the coffee shops and don't think of the problems behind it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll circle round to sort of changes in the culture and the laws sort of later on in the podcast. But yeah, I believe the Dutch quite aptly call it the backdoor problem, which is that cannabis can materialize in a coffee shop, but it can't ever get there. And obviously the government can then come along and go, well, we want tax. You're taking up a property, you're selling a commodity. So it's, as long as you're kind of greasing that palm, then your local authority is quite happy to take that money. So yeah, I would recommend to any of my listeners, for all travel is now opening back up again, thanks to sort of lifting of COVID restrictions, I would get over and experience Amsterdam's culture, because the current mayor seems to be really a stickler for trying to cut down on current tourist trade and basically any form of expansion, and they're actually trying to constrict any growth within the industry.
Yeah, they've been doing that for years. I don't know. I think we just vote the wrong people all the time.
I think that is a universal feeling wherever anybody currently finds themselves watching or listening to this, that, we always just vote for the damn wrong people. Yeah. Well, I suppose we'll start off from the beginning, because this is one hell of a journey. Like I said to anyone, if you maybe even want to pause this and see if you get a hold of, go watch Mila's journey and then come back to this, because honestly, this is going to be a hell of a recording. But yeah, I suppose we'll go back to your first experience with cannabis. Can you tell us about that?
My first experience was actually with hashish. I started smoking in 1965, or that winter, 64, 65. And in those days, there was no weed in Amsterdam at all, not one little bud anywhere. There was only hash. And it used to get imported from Turkey, Iran, Africa. And so you'd go to pubs and clubs around the harbor, and that's where you could score. It would be sold by the matchbox. And that's what was my first experience. My boyfriend at that time was studying to be a doctor and was interested in the effect of hash on someone. So I became his guinea pig. And I remember the first joint I had, I ended up rolling on the ground, just laughing. And I always believe it was love at first talk. Yeah.
I love that. Love it first talk. Wow. So how old were you when that was? No, when was that?
I was already 21, I think. Yeah, wasn't until later. It wasn't around in Holland before that time very much. Not in where I was hanging out anyway.
I suppose, given what we know from sort of European history, that after sort of the war, it took a while for certain economies and there to actually be transportation routes between different nations for smugglers to actually start to get drugs. It's one of those consequences we don't really think of, is actually during the Second World War, most of the governments kind of took all of the drugs and we'll have all the amphetamine, we'll take all of that cocaine, all of that opioids and sent them to the troops at the front line. It's created kind of a deficit in drug trades. So then it did take quite a while, and there wasn't even also necessarily the same sort of desire or market there was. But after the collective trauma, I suppose, of Second World War and the economic hardship that came after that, a lot of people needed a way to kind of kick back. And I think, hash arrived at the perfect time in Europe for the summer, gearing up through the 60s to the Summer of Love.
Yeah. So smoked then I didn't. Since then, actually, I haven't stopped smoking.
So what I like to hear, and it's one of the things I was really pleased to note. I can't remember where I saw it. It might have been shout out Sensi Seeds, an article on your Sensi Seeds. That stated that you're an old school smoker through and through. You smoke. You're not one for sort of vaporization or the rest of it. And it's something that's quite close to my heart, is that I'm watching a lot of the generation around me move towards vaporization through different extracts, etc. And they're losing this natural relationship with the plant. They can't identify a good quality bud. They can't identify a good quality piece of hash. They can only tell what the effect will be from using a vape or even a floral vape, you know?
Yeah. And I still smoke the same way. In those days people smoked with hash and tobacco. I still do, though I've cut the tobacco a hell of a lot now. So I smoke a lot of small joints a day, and I didn't cut on the hash.
Excellent. I suppose you've probably seen the hash move immensely through quality and through sort of different variety over those years since your first sort of talk at 2021.
Yeah, and then later in 68, I traveled overland to India. So I came through Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and all those countries, people smoke hash. And that's actually strange that all the way from Northern Africa to China, people are hash smokers, except maybe in southern regions like South India and Thailand, where they might smoke some weed. But everywhere else, it's only hash that people smoke.
Is it? I suppose they're quite warmer climates. So I wonder if that's maybe got something to do with it.
The Himalayas is not particularly warm, which immediately brings me to the memory of going up into the mountains with some sadhus who wanted to show us their most favorite plants. And we climbed up and up and up, and we're close to the tree line. And there was this little dell kind of that had been covered with snow all winter. but underneath last year's plants had survived, and they grew like little bonsais with lots of short angled little branches and with loads of buds, but all very small. And actually we rubbed those buds and immediately put it into a chillum, as is their want, sadhu smoked chillums. And that was actually probably about the best hash I ever smoked, because it was still so fresh. So you still get the CBDA and maybe other terpenes that disappear, but it was an amazing walk down that mountain again. Yeah.
Well, I bet. Well, I suppose the different sort of altitudes massively change the climates. And obviously there is this whole thing of we're beginning to understand the sort of journey of cannabis, as it were, back up to the Tibetan plateau and quite high up in as an altitude. And so the reason for the proliferation of THC on the plant is to protect it from UV rays. So I guess, going back to it, where it in its optimum environment, then it's probably going to produce its widest sort of spectrum of products. So I can imagine. And again, the not necessarily placebo effect, but the wonderful thing of having taken that and done it yourself as well. You know what I mean? It's the same as cooking. When you cook a meal, it always tastes better.
Yeah, but we were already making a hash, just rubbing it like the locals did for a while then. But that was quite And wait, I'm sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. You were saying something that I actually wanted to respond to, and it's gone now. Sorry.
That's quite all right. I think what were we talking about? I got so into that as well. I was literally picturing myself on the side of the Himalayas there, and just all the snow. I suppose we'll step back a bit then to. So you I think you said just before we started recording, you were quite young when because a lot of people maybe won't know this, but you were actually born in the UK.
Yes, I was born in Chester, close to Liverpool. And so I believe that makes me a Scoutsy. But I left England when my dad retired. I was 11 at that time, and they went to live in Holland. And they lived in the country, and then later I moved to Amsterdam.
Nice. So I suppose it wasn't as much of when I was looking at sort of the notes of this, I thought you were a bit older when you sort of transitioned over to Amsterdam, but I guess that explains you were able to then obviously adapt to the language and the culture rather than sort of being just dropped into it, as it were, because you were a bit younger. How did you find sort of learning the language?
Oh, to learn Dutch was terrible. Actually, those first few years were probably the most difficult in my life. You know, getting teased at school because your pronunciation sucks, your spelling sucks, your word choice sucks. So that made life quite difficult.
I suppose having the dual languages that's then helped. Did you have to learn any other languages on your travels? Because obviously I didn't realize quite how far you have traveled.
No, at school we had to learn French and German, which I know marginally, but not much more than to do some very limited shopping.
just enough to function. I suppose that's the British philosophy of learning language. I need to order food, alcohol, and get a taxi. That's about the three things most Brits figure they need to learn. Yeah. So in your time when you moved to Amsterdam, what did you sort of initially do when you moved to again, it was quite a time to move to Amsterdam as well. It'll have been mid-early 60s?
Yeah, that was early 64. And actually the first place I moved to was a home for unmarried mothers. That's where my oldest daughter was born. But then I decided I did some course on dressmaking, and then I ended up opening a boutique with a young guy who was just fantastically creative designer. I was really lucky with that. And we were the boutique where you could actually buy a mini skirt in those days. I mean, you could always cut off your skirt, but we actually produced them, and plenty of other things that were for the time quite outrageous. Yeah, and then all went well. And then, to make a long story short, Timothy Leary came along, and you should drop out. And all this hard work with the boutique seemed suddenly like, why the hell? So we changed it to a tea house. And that was very nice and relaxed. And we sold different kinds of teas. And it became like a gathering point for travelers. So we got people coming from the east, bringing temple bowls from Nepal, Afghani hash, but then also dropouts from the Vietnam War coming from the States, some of them bringing LSD. So it was quite a wild time. And in the end, the local police didn't like it and threatened problems. So I got rid of the tea house and started hitchhiking to India. I ended up there in mid 68, late 68, and lived there till 88, basically, off and on, most of the time.
So where was it you settled in India?
Different places, but always the summer months, somewhere up in the Himalayas, and I loved it there. Yeah. I brought up my kids there. We used to go trekking every summer, and
Wow.
I made our own hash. And then later I got to know some of the Afghan guys in New Delhi and could get some Afghan hash, which was by far considered the most superior hash available in those days. And it was very, very good. Yeah.
Nice. I suppose you always seem to have kind of had this connective relationship then with the plant. But wherever you go, you seem to gravitate towards the plant, and it seems to gravitate towards you.
Yeah, well, I just started liking smoking hash, and especially in those countries, it's usually available somewhere, made locally. And I also learned different techniques that the hash was made, which was later very handy when I came back to Amsterdam. Yeah, then when I came back to Amsterdam in 88, suddenly the whole city was full with coffee shops, and all of them were selling weed and maybe some hash. But that would usually be Moroccan hash, and as far as I was concerned, the quality didn't get anywhere close to my favorite Afghan hash in those days. Yeah. Well, the first time I went to Morocco was in 65. They didn't even have any hash. They were smoking something they called keef, which was basically very small buds chopped together with black tobacco, and then they'd put a little bit in their sipsy and smoke it like that. Apparently, hash was only introduced to Morocco in 67, 68 by hippies coming back from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, wherever, where they'd gotten involved with making of hash, and taught the Moroccans, and now I think they're the biggest hash producing country in the world.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't realize that it was so recent, because I think it is the Riff Mountain range. I mean, I was lucky enough to go to Chefchaouen the other year. Beautiful part of the world. Was really blown away, and we were fortunate enough to travel to see a few of the guys. We didn't get to see any hash making lessons. We were trying to coordinate that, but just couldn't kind of pull it together. But we saw some of the.
Maybe you were there at the wrong time. Maybe you were there at the wrong time of year.
Maybe so. It was we were having an issue with sort of translating sort of language and times and everything else was quite difficult. But some of the product that we got to see, the bags of just again the still the siphing to create a keef and then pressing from that is very impressed. It was a shame we didn't get to see sort of any real mass flowers again because of the time of year that we kind of went. But it doesn't surprise me that actually you can see the kind of, you can map it out in your mind the pathways back to the countries where the traditional production of charas and hash and these other techniques have been so influential in the culture for so long that they were just kind of almost overlooked. cannabis in a lot of sense was not really even thought of as a drug in most of the Eastern cultures until the West came along and went, we're calling this a bad thing now, you better call it a bad thing as well.
Yeah, I think in Persia, they used to even write poetry about it. The great effects of smoking hash.
Again, the Middle East, when you think of it now, and you think quite draconian drug laws, and still, I mean, obviously there's a little bit of movements in like the United Arab Emirates and a few other places, but it's,
but it's also like in Asia, in India, and in China, that in India, definitely before the written word, cannabis was already a medicinal plant. And I think they were using it in childbirth, I forget exactly. But in China also, they've been using cannabis for thousands of years.
As you say, that's a very interesting point that a lot of people seem to forget, is we draw these sort of numbers on them, but language is quite new in the evolution of humanity. We have existed and done things through the Socratic method of showing another person, taught and handed down these techniques. It's not until quite recent we figured out, if you write it on this thing and you keep this out of water and out of this and out of that, it'll survive. But then even with the rise of different, I mean, we had sort of Nixon and it was the other one, Reagan.
Now we had our own that they burned down all kind of church and relics and books and stuff in Europe also and through the ages. Book burning was quite popular.
Exactly, and the most recent sort of incarnation of that is, like I said, there's Reagan and Nixon basically writing to the American institutions and then bullying the UN and others to kind of redact or destroy any of the evidence that was already there, the scientific evidence about cannabis, about cannabinoids, terpenes, to just help back up their propaganda and racist war.
Yeah. Well, and funnily enough, it was in the States that some of the first legalization laws came about.
Yeah, it's interesting that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the not necessarily the American populace, but its political apparatus definitely has a big part to play in pushing the UN to get rid of this single convention. It's so out of date now. It looks ridiculous. Every year it gets worse to anybody with a rational mind.
Yeah.
As you say, like Holland has been held up, Amsterdam has been this bastion of cannabis freedom for so long. But as you say, most people don't know that it's tolerated. Soft drugs are tolerated. Sort of the smart shops and other things that are allowed to exist. But even psilocybin, magic mushrooms, were only quite recently criminalized. But this then led to the truffle industry. So the ingenuity of the Dutch immediately went, we've got a way around this, and created actually a whole new line of novel psychedelic compounds or ways of taking psychedelic compounds. So it just shows that the harder they press against it.
When they legalized the mushrooms, they had even installed a council from the government to look into the mushroom problem. And the council said, you don't have to legalize it. It's not really a problem. And still they made it illegal. That was quite, anyway. I tend to do more things like that here.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's an interesting, if you looked at it sort of on a time scale, the Netherlands sort of moved ahead quite fast with drug policy, but then other countries are now sort of catching up, and you kind of not necessarily falling. Overtaking
Holland. If you go to the States now, you can't believe Holland looks nearly medieval. They've developed so many techniques now to make these extractions pure and get hold of all these terpenes and cannabinoids and learn to work with them. And I'm always amazed at the progress of development over there.
Yeah, it just shows again, if you allow people to come out of the shadows that have, like yourself, that have been in this for decades, that have lifelong skill sets, experience and knowledge that deserves to be in an industry that can be profitable,
Yeah, and it should be that in any industry, things progress and modernize. I can't say that I like smoking on some of these new products, not all of them. I prefer my old-fashioned hash personally. Although, well, that's a different subject, but you can make hash either from dry sift or from what you separate with water and ice. And I always advise people who like really the aroma and taste in their hash should make hash from dry sift. And the water ice method, it has maybe less taste and less stronger, but it has less taste and less flavor, smell, but it's goddamn stronger. And I must say, I personally prefer my best hash is a nice isolator hash.
Mm. No, yeah, I would agree with that. I suppose this is a really good point to segue onto now. I didn't realize I'd known that you'd invent the Pollinator, but you've invented 3 different sort of different products now. So there's the Pollinator, Bubblinator, and I'm looking for it on my notes. Isolator. So can you tell us about these? How did they come to sort of be?
Okay, we have to go back in history. It's when I came to Amsterdam and there was no good hash available in the coffee shops. But I was growing in that time. This was the late 80s, the early 90s. And there were many discussions going on about legalizing it. And it certainly wasn't looked down on extremely harshly if you were growing things. And me having by now 4 kids to support, most of them going to high school by now, I needed to create income, and I started growing weed. And that went quite well. And so I had the material that I could, in the end, make my own hash. And I did. And I did it in the Afghan style. I got a flat screen and kind of waffled the material over the screen. And the crystals would slowly come through. It would take you about an hour to make enough for one joint. And then one night I'm standing in front of my clothes dryer where all these clothes are tumbling around. And I'm suddenly thinking, that's more or less what I'm doing with dried marijuana material. So the next day we bought a secondhand clothes dryer. We ripped out the heating element, and I think we just tied a piece of screen around the drum and threw in a bunch of material. And lo and behold, after a few minutes, there was already enough lying down there to make a joint. And that's the beginning of what became the Pollinator. And it was the first machine way to really separate crystals from the plant material, because up until then they'd been making hash sometimes for thousands of years, but it was always very much just a manual job. So this was the first machine to do it. I think that's in the end what gave me the name of being Hash Queen, for being the first person that gave people who were growing a few plants the opportunity to make some hash in a fairly simple way. And then word came from the States. People were using water to separate the crystals. And in the end, some machine came out of it. And it was a big wooden thing containing a stainless steel bucket kind of thing with a screen at the bottom, and then a plastic tube at the bottom that emptied into a little glass bottle. And it was wonderful to watch the crystals slowly slide down that plastic into the little bottle. But the last they were being made in Yugoslavia, and the welding of the plastic was the wrong way around. And anyway, they all broke within 6 months. So I was trying to rack my brains on how to be able to send this water ice system in an envelope, basically. And I think there it helped me being a tailor and having run a boutique and thinking in the end of cloth, because how are you going to suspend a screen more or less horizontally in a bucket of water? So then the thought came, and I sewed up the first samples myself and tried it out, and it worked. So that was the beginning of the isolator. But the isolator is quite work intensive. And then later we were starting to use washing machines. And then in the end, we got our own small washing machines, and we'd make a pyramid bag that you could put your material in. You threw ice water into the bubbleator, the small washing machine, turned it on, and it was marvelous because a washing machine was designed to get your dirty socks clean. And for this water washing machine with ice water inside, these crystals were dirt, and they washed them off very thoroughly. They'd all end up in the runoff water, and the hose the runoff water came out of, you'd hang some screen bags underneath, and there was all your crystals. And that's become very popular. Yeah.
Yeah. It's something I'll be doing not too distant future. I've been slowly accumulating various different bits. I think we're up to about 8 or 9 different cultivars of different tubs of bits. Trying to make sure. I think we want to try and get to a dozen, really. Ideally, I think we want to be able to say, that's a 12 sample hash. Yeah, I just love the cocktails of isolate. It is obviously, like you said, less compared to the connoisseur of sort of the techniques that people like Frenchie and that brought forward. But the
was very much old school. Yeah, he was very much an old school person. I loved him a lot. I'm sad he's gone. We worked out one time that we were both at the same New Year's Eve party in Goa in the 70s somewhere. But he was 30 years younger and a bachelor, and I was a mother of 4 kids. And he was French in those days, speaking on mostly French. So our paths didn't really meet at that time. But later we laughed about it a lot.
Wow, so it just shows that I think the people that move within similar circles, they end up sort of synchronistically in the same sort of places. And even if they don't have the opportunity to meet like that, then their paths will again, like the universe will keep bouncing them together until you say hello.
Yeah, something like that. But I think a lot of friendships are built up of shared paths. And it doesn't mean they need to have sat in the same train as you were. But just mentioning an Indian train will bring both people back with memories. And that's a beginning of a bonding. Yeah.
Anyway. For sure. I'm just going to go back to my notes. I think we've covered quite a lot of these. There is an interesting one I wanted to sort of ask you about, which is an incident in Frankfurt in Germany with a suitcase full of hash.
Well, there was 6 kilos of hash in there. And it was somebody else's hash. It wasn't even my own. But anyway, I decided to run it and got past and was in the jail for 3 months. I was very lucky with finding a lawyer, because when I got past, I could choose a lawyer, and there was pages of lawyers. But one lawyer was red and circled, so I hope somebody had put that around there because they liked him. So and he was really superb. He already visited within 6 weeks, and some people after 6 months were still waiting to see their lawyer for the first time. So I was very lucky with that. And in the court case, it was also very strange because somehow they'd figured out that I lived in the Himalayas and had studied some Buddhist things. And then even the judge, he said, first he wanted to know, because he'd heard about the trekking, if I'd ever had been so high up in the mountains that we needed an oxygen mask. And I said, no, but we have definitely been. And we started talking about that. And then he started talking about Buddhism. And he gave this whole story of the Buddha and the elephant before he looked around him and said, well, this wasn't really the place to discuss that, but we understood each other. Mm-hmm. And that was superb. Yeah. At the end, then you can say something yourself. So I did it in my best German, which had quite a slang of the Knast, of the jail, as they call it there. Anyway, and basically what I said, for me, it was one thing to just sit in one place and have time. But for my children in the Himalayas, it was quite different to be missing their mom. And they let me go. So that was, it was not a good experience, but thank goodness it didn't last too long.
Wow. Yeah, fortunate. Again, it's just the similar paths, I guess, in that for all the judge ended up in the judiciary, and you chose and had the life that you had. That because of those similarities, he saw a commonality in you, and yeah, he could have seen you as this big, dirty criminal hippie, trying to take over the world, as a lot of the establishment did at the time. So I think that's great that you kind of I suppose. One of the other interactions with law enforcement, I guess I wanted to ask about, or I'm assuming actually it's with law enforcement. I found an anecdote of obviously that you're a keen grower. It was a comment in an article with yourself talking about the loss of 24,000 plants 10 days before harvest in 1992.
Yeah. That was very sad. Anyway, I didn't really get into any problems about it. I was given this job of running this greenhouse, which was 4,000 square meters. And I had help with the planting of clones. For like 6-7 months. We'd already been preparing to have a large enough amount of clones to fill that place. And I started picking all the tallest clones first and put them all together in the back, and then slowly, smaller ones till all the little ones were at the front, and all went really well. And one of my favorite, I used to figure that I needed some kind of time to do just relaxation. So I picked this song because the radio was blaring all day, and it was 7 seconds. So anytime, and I was lucky they played it several times a year that summer. They would play it, I'd stop working and just dance up and down the big aisle down the middle. That was very nice. It's still one of my favorite songs. Anyway. Yeah, but already I could see the helicopters above. Not many, but a helicopter, I could see it. And so then I said, maybe we should whitewash the top of the greenhouse again, but they decided that that would even draw more attention to the place, so we didn't. And sure enough, one day I left immediately. There wasn't really anything to do. All looked great. And as I was leaving, we ran into some cop cars, but didn't really think anything of it. We were already like 5 miles away. But that evening it was on the news, and I looked at it and God damn it, it was our own bloody place. Anyway, that was that one gone. Yeah, and then after that, I realized that having these 4 kids at home, it wasn't really very smart to be doing these things at this level, because even though they weren't making too many problems about small grows, they were definitely not happy with these big grows. So I had to think of something else to make money, and I already had a pollinator for my own use, and then decided to try and make some more. And we did. And in the end, we traveled to all kind of grow shops in Holland in a little van with a pollinator in the back. And I'd tell them I was coming. And if they had some old material, we'd drink a cup of coffee with them and show them our new product. And we did. And as we drank our coffee, those guys were looking at what was happening in the bottom of the machine. And usually we managed to sell the pollinators we had with us right there and then. And that's how it started. We built it up from 3 machines to 5 to 9. And slowly we built it up. And I still make pollinators downstairs. We have a workshop.
Excellent. Sorry, I'm trying to fiddle with my camera. For some reason, it's decided to go into...
It doesn't let me see you anymore.
Edit mode. Sorry, 2 seconds.
Yeah, I don't know anything about these things. I can't help you.
I do love modern technology.
I don't touch anything, so I don't know.
We'll just continue, because I'm struggling to get it to.
Oh, it says here Simpa Carter, and then it has a camera with an arrow, and then at the bottom it said stop video, but the camera is still on, as far as I can see. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's something with my software on this side. Okay, we'll continue with audio, I guess, at this point. I do apologize for anyone that tunes in just to see my face. But yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I guess you see how all of those, they tied in. And again, it's the experience and sort of the knowledge that you'd acquired that was allowed you to sort of transition into then setting up, I guess, Pollinator is a full then legal business because it's not a cannabis product. It's something for cannabis, I suppose, but it's not considered like paraphernalia.
Not really, no. At this very moment, our bank is doing an investigation, but they're more concerned that people are using it to make hash. I don't know. The thing is that you can also use my machines to make like CBD oil. Like you can basically make oil in two different methods, and one you use the whole plant, and eventually what you will extract is probably black in color. If you throw the dried plants through the pollinator first and just only work with the crystals, your oil will be clear and transparent, and that's what the producer is looking for and what the client wants. So there have been times that we were selling a lot of these big machines. So our bank seems to think that that was all to make black market stuff, but it wasn't. So anyway, yeah, I think we'll do this one.
It seems to be a common issue. Oh, I've got it working. It seems to be a common issue across the world, really, is entrepreneurs and individuals like yourselves that invent technology based on. Hey, there you go, I'm back.
Hey, there you are. Good to see you.
Likewise. Yeah, the people that then basically create these technologies, and then the establishment, especially banking here in the UK at the minute, hydroponic shops are having a real nightmare, and basically the banks are trying to force them into like 80% digital sales, 20% cash, or a ratio of about this. So they're arguing that, proceeds of crime, and they're saying that, well, criminals are buying your technology and they're using it to, create a criminal enterprise.
Yeah.
Which,
well, thank goodness with us, we do sell about 85% retail, and most of that goes abroad. So I don't think that can really say very much. Anyway, we'll find out.
Well, got my fingers crossed for you. I mean, hopefully, as you say, we're seeing... again, I guess the same mentality of people going around the world and then coming back and sharing their technology and skills and experience that we were talking about that created Morocco's industry. And as you said, it now makes them yet a global leader. Is the same that's happening now. We're in like a second renaissance of people traveling to Australia, to Israel, over to Canada, to America, finding regions where there's just enough movement in the law that others can congregate together and go, well, I know this, oh, I know this, and I know this, and put it all together and come up with a whole new concept and new ideas. And it's a really exciting time to be sort of alive and involved in all of this industry.
Yeah, I feel really lucky to be here now, because with these, I give these Dabadoo parties, which are basically just hash competitions, but much loved by all, and the food is always good. And in 2019, I had 5 Dabadoos in South America, and that's fascinating to see what's all going in these different countries. Recently, when we had a Dabadoo in Barcelona at the beginning of March, all the people who had organized the Dabadoo in 2019 were there. So we sat all together, and now we planned a wonderful tour for this fall. And I'll be traveling to 8 different countries, spending about 10 days in each country. And I'm really looking forward to that. Some of these Dabadoos get quite amazing. Like the first one in Colombia, the guy hired a helicopter to take me to the place where the Dabadoo party was going to be. I'd never sat in a helicopter before, and there I'm going over the jungles in Colombia. But then the nice thing was that he'd hired a helicopter for the whole day. So a lot of the people who came to the Dabadoo, they all had a little helicopter ride and had a toke on high and came down again. That was just amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. One in Colombia was on an island in the Caribbean. Yeah, that was also really spectacular. Beautiful, beautiful. And all the local fishermen from all the other islands came over to bring lobsters and crabs and all kind of stuff. And we had so good food there. It was really great. Yeah.
It's beautiful to see. It's one of the things I must admit, the part of the body of my work is, I guess, informed by classism. I'm quite worried that a lot of the progress that's made around the world is built on the same kind of neoliberalistic, capitalist, blood sport, quarterly growth model that we've seen for decades. So to see traditionally sort of developing countries being allowed, I suppose, yeah, in some ways there are vested Western investment, but being allowed to kind of explore their culture and create these more sort of soft touch approaches. I mean, there's a lot of South America really moving forward thick and fast with large cultivation sites, which the hypocrisy argument falls quite fast. That as soon as they create this so-called medical cannabis production, the local communities are suddenly like, well, no, we can do it now. We're going to do it. And they're creating these wonderful, really bespoke community cafes and consumer spaces and trades.
Like in Colombia, the main production of their medical cannabis seems to be in the hands of, among others, Canadian companies. But each large company, of which there are 3, are required at least to buy 10% of their produce with local growers. So that's really nice. That's how a friend of mine got in there. So she's accepted and, gets a good legal return on her harvest. So these things are great like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it's a kind of a legitimization of a pre-existing sort of industry. If you look at, say, cocaine and how that works in terms of the amount it's worth in the locale when it's produced versus then its end market. So as you say, Canada as well, I know Israel are quietly investing in a lot of the foreign regions, and it's basically on a guidance kind of model because they want to be able to get the cost of a gram, I think in Colombia is now down to 0.06 cents. So they're trying to really go to the bottom end of the market to create these international markets for countries that don't have the natural climate for production. So the ones that do, it's good to see that even if it's a small number as 10%, that 10% is still better than, I guess, nothing, and gives them an opportunity to create a domestic market that then they can, unionize and move forward with, then making sure they don't get pushed out by the big boys.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know much about the cocaine industry anyway.
It was just a sort of a comparison I meant in terms of the way the markets work. But yeah, that's amazing. So how many countries have you had a Dabadoo event in now?
Oh, loads of different countries. In North America, not in Canada yet. Spain and Holland, and not really in other European countries yet. But we did like 4 in Mexico, 5 in Colombia, 1 in Porto, no, I forget now. In Peru, and Costa Rica, of course. Mexico. And this year we're going to add Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina also to it. Yeah, wow. It's going to be a good trip.
It's a hell of a South American tour.
Yes, yes.
It's a shame. I suppose I'm not really aware of any real movement in these sort of Central American countries because there's quite a lot of them. I imagine there's probably a thriving cannabis and hash scene there. Do you know anything much about Central America?
I go to Mexico and to Costa Rica. In Costa Rica, it's always very low. Well, the one time we did it was very low key. It seems to be quite illegal there. So they didn't want any public notifications about what was going to happen. And Well, in Mexico, well, there it's already much bigger, the whole scene.
Mm.
Yeah.
I suppose, yeah, I've had a few different motions passed by, I can't remember the political structure of Mexico, one of the houses that basically said that it's unconstitutional to criminalize cannabis. So there are different pockets of different regions kind of moving in different ways. And again, I think Mexico is trying to be smart, it would seem, or at least from the outside view from my limited knowledge, in that they're not moving too fast because they don't want, again, foreign conglomerates owning the industry. You know, we've had the war on drugs has dramatically detrimentally affected Mexico. The majority of deaths from cartels for following the Mexican border, yet the majority of those consumers are on the other side in America. So I think they deserve an opportunity to rebalance and address that inequity.
Yeah.
Hopefully they will get the opportunity. What else did I want to ask you about? So I've got on my notes that you opened or ran temporarily a cannabis focused hotel in Amsterdam. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It was in the past. That was in 98 it opened, and it closed in 2015, I think, something like that. That was really nice. It had a late night bar. It was open till 3 and 4 in the weekends. It was very small. It had 5 rooms.
Wow.
With a 5-room hotel, you can never really make money.
Yeah.
So all the years we made it, we always broke even, more or less. And for my personal income, I wasn't dependent on the hotel, so that really helped.
Mm-hmm.
And then apparently you have so many years that you can get, and then you have to get new permission from your landlord. And I don't know what he was thinking, that we managed to make money there anyway, because now he's running a hotel there. He must be finding out that you're lucky if you break even. But it was fun. It was a great time, and we used to have great visitors and great times. And because it was on the square there, every Queen's Day or King's Day nowadays, we'd have huge parties with trance music and everything. Yeah, it was nice. It was a good time.
So was it kind of like more of like a modern version of what you had at the tea room, at the tea house?
No, people rented rooms and downstairs. No, there wasn't really that much drugs going on, because there's all coffee shops, so they didn't need to come. And I didn't want the hotel to become known as that, because that's not really what you want if you're running a public business.
I suppose, yeah, true. It's weird that, well, not weird, it's just the evolution. So actually this brings me on to a question that I really wanted to particularly ask yourself about because of your lived experience. And that's, how has the culture of Amsterdam changed since you sort of first went there in your late teens, early 20s, to now sort of where we are? We joked before about Holland in general falling behind. So yeah, how has it sort of progressed and changed over those years?
Well, when I first started smoking, it was also illegal in the 60s. Then people became more tolerant. Then I'm trying to remember, because I wasn't even here. I think it was in 82 the first coffee shops opened, or maybe in the late 70s. Anyway, they've been there for 40 years and still they can't get the buying of the weed legal. So that's kind of tragic. Yeah. I don't know. They used to be ahead. If I go to the States now and you tell them you come from Amsterdam, they all want to come. And I tell them you have more freedoms here in the States these days with your dispensaries than we do in Amsterdam. More variety, more choice. Even Barcelona, I think, now has more choice and better products than the Amsterdam coffee shops, which is very sad. And now they sell the isolator so expensive here, I can't even afford it. In the beginning, I used to go by and joke, yeah, I invented the isolator, but I can't afford to smoke it at your prices. It's like €100 a gram, if not more. It's crazy.
Wow. I suppose that's a consequence of the BHO market and everyone getting into shatter and waxes, etc. So a lot of what would have been product that went towards hash production typically now, moves towards these quite higher markup products so they can make
those are all totally illegal in Holland. They will not sell them in the coffee shops, even though rosin technically should be legal because it hasn't been interfered with, nothing has been added, like with the BHOs, which are totally illegal here. Rarely there'll be a coffee shop kind of selling them under a different name, but most of them don't. They don't want to lose their license, so they just sell regular hash and import hash. And
there does seem to be sort of a tolerance in some of the coffee shops towards dab culture, so that they're kind of going, well, we're not selling it. If they've then kind of brought it with them, they're choosing to consume that way. And obviously there is now. I'm sorry, go on.
There's several that entered the Dabadoo with extracts or rosin. So yeah, they're into it, but they just can't publicly have it in their coffee shops too obvious.
Which is a shame, because then it's going to hold back, as we were saying, the Dutch heritage and its evolution into the next sort of iteration of this. I mean, obviously, you've always had the free radicals. You had people like Nol van Schaik and Willys Wortel, and they would have the press. So they were pressing that quite early on, and they were pushing those limits, always forever pushing those limits. And whenever he came to the UK as well, helping to push those limits.
Yeah, but pressing it is okay, because I understand from Dutch law, so long as you don't add anything, you're okay. Yeah. So pressing it, squeezing it like in a rosin press, these things should technically are okay. It's just like with a BHO, whether you're adding whatever you're adding, that's already wrong.
Yeah.
Like they used to, when the mushrooms were legal, try and make mushroom soup, but that was illegal.
Yeah, it's an oddity, isn't it? That I suppose they went, no, you can have that one thing exactly as we know what you do with it. As soon as you start doing other things, we haven't thought about that and we don't want to think about that. The kind of, especially as a Brit traveling to Amsterdam, and I suppose quite to the detriment, actually. I mean, I don't drink alcohol, but I know a lot of Brits that go over to Amsterdam and drink due to excess and create quite a hedonistic and egoic image of the Brits. But most of us go over there for the smoke and for the freedom of being able to, find the few places that allow, still will sell mushrooms, and you ask for the other menu sort of thing. And that there is still that kind of, I guess it hasn't gone mainstream. It's obviously globally being known, but unlike where America and Canada, they become so.
We don't have huge companies here. We don't have huge companies owning the coffee shop. Sometimes there'll be 2 or 3 kind of joined together, but that's mainly for practical purposes. They can buy stuff together or whatever.
Like north-south sort of versions. I mean, I suppose you've got a Greenhouse and Ari and those guys. But interestingly, now it's interesting to see.
But it's not like they got 20 coffee shops. I think they got 3 here in the city, and that's it as far as we know.
Yeah, I mean, they've branched, and it's interesting how all of the let's just talk of them as brands, I guess, for ease moving forward. They're all integrating into other markets. So quite interestingly, some of the, I don't want to say failing, maybe struggling, non-recently renovated or invested coffee shops in Amsterdam have then been allowing the the sort of commingling of other companies. So obviously the Plug from England, they've taken over. I think it was the Noon they took over.
And the Terp Army is like that.
Terp Army, yeah. Then you've got Cookies as well that took over El Guapo, maybe.
Maybe. I tell you, I saw them in the coffee shops here.
It's just, again, as you said, there's so many of them. Unfortunately, some are getting caught up, like Mellow Yellow, which was still, I guess, recognized as the first full coffee shop. That was shut down only a few years ago because of its location to a primary school or to a school. But I believe that the school actually opened after the coffee shop. So it's kind of one of those things that's very frustrating.
No, a lot of coffee shops went that way. A lot of coffee shops, because they got caught out with a 16-year-old in there. They closed a lot of the coffee shops.
Yeah, and it's a shame. I mean, as far as I'm aware now, there is a Dutch pilot program in a few cities where they're allowing government-backed cultivation, and that then being sold to certain coffee shops so they can basically just document and create data from seed to sale. What are your thoughts on sort of that model?
I don't see any good coming out of it yet. I haven't heard anyone being enthusiastic about that yet, but time will tell. I know there's guys working very hard at it, especially this friend of mine who wants to produce their hash. So he's trying to work at it that he needs to be able to grow a lot of weed to be able to make the amount of hash required. I don't know. I'll believe it when I see it, So like in 92, 93, it seemed far closer that legalization was going to happen. Everybody seemed to agree on it. I've got a whole section of my museum is just newspaper headlines, how everybody's agreeing and that it's a mistake that marijuana ended up on the opium list. And then it never happened and it still hasn't happened. So let's see.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I was until we had Brexit over here in the UK. I'd often kind of joke that we're going to be dragged in by the EU before the UK kind of changes its laws. Obviously, we now are outside of the EU. Again, kind of, I guess, showing my prejudice that I much rather would be inside of the big body of friends just across that little bit of water than outside of it. Well, that's my politics. Yeah. But do you think then the Dutch government will get there faster than the European Union because they're moving quite fast? It looks like they're building a model because they want economics, basically. So they want a model of some version of legalization that all of the member states agree with so they can trade and sell amongst themselves. Do you think that'll get somewhere before the Dutch government?
I never thought about it, but I don't know. I just stopped thinking about these things because they just drag on for years and years, and most of my life actually. So I'm 77 now, and whatever happens, we'll deal with it when it comes.
It's interesting, I suppose. Yeah, you've literally lived through, you've consumed when it wasn't illegal and lived through the entirety of the war on drugs thus far. Wow.
Yeah.
That's mental. Yeah, again, I think of the youth that are born today, as we were saying about consumption. A lot of people in the UK, their first access to cannabis is floral, herbal cannabis. Whereas my first access to it, I'm 34 now, was what we used to colloquially call tack, was very hard, very low grade hash. And it would be the rocky, the dark, really rocky stuff.
Yeah. Oh, we had a name for that, but it wasn't that. Anyway, I forget now. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah,
and that was most of our sort of things. And I had a guest on recently who actually made a point of saying, the grade and quality of that, you were probably getting more dizzy and an effect or an illusion of thinking you were high from the amount you'd smoked than the actual content of the cannabinoids in it. But it was also the thing of a teenage rebellion for me. It was getting a Coke can, meticulously putting all of the holes in and getting it. No, you're doing it wrong. Give it here and make sure you get the grid right. And the whole the preparation for it and the community aspect of it. I think that's what I have this real vivid nostalgia for.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, like we said before, of sort of extracts.
Well, I guess especially due to Corona, we've all become single soul smokers. I don't see much sharing going on as there always used to be.
Exactly.
By chance, I don't know.
I mean, there's quite a few sort of, I guess, the hygienically minded amongst us, shall we say, use different devices now. You've got like the silicon stoppers for bongs and dab rigs and different things you can plug into a joint. So obviously, I think people are slowly stepping back into that understanding of, I mean, again, my ultimate favorite memory, I guess, of cannabis is being a quite young man, probably about 13 at this point, standing outside of a local convenience shop, trying to convince anybody that will in the world to go in and buy me 10 Richmond or 10 Lambert and Butler. We'd then have to get some skins as well. And then, somebody else would have to go and then get the Rocky. And then we'd meet somewhere and we'd all two people would cover you from the wind. And it was just this team effort of 4 people to smoke like a joint that just wouldn't hold together. And you had to hold the end of it and keep lighting it every 4 seconds. But it was wonderful, because it was just, I don't know, the collective effort of it. And I think that a lot of people miss that because it's not a struggle anymore. In a lot of places, you can get cannabis as fast as you can get pizza.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you always could over here for a long time already anyway.
Yeah, I suppose Amsterdam obviously has always benefited from, and I guess still does now with, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, but Schiphol Airport obviously being such a giant hub, and with the ports as well and everything else, as you were saying before, has meant that it's always had a lot of trade moving through it. Wherever there is trade, there is an opportunity to smuggle. Where you can smuggle, people get pretty good with bringing in certain products, and it's interesting that there's an argument that was made by, I can't remember who it was. It was in an article I read a few years ago, and the author was basically stating that we saw a progression away from hash towards floral cannabis once we didn't need such an emphasis on smuggling. Once people realized they could domestically produce, a lot of people didn't then go through the process of making it in hash, because the reason you're making it in hash is you can move thousands of plants in blocks rather than the flower itself would create such a large amount, and the smell and the logistics of it made it a lot harder. So do you think that then, I don't want to say, because hash isn't necessarily, I don't want to say it's a dying art form, but unless there is investment in the countries and regions where it is a cultural sort of birthright and it is where it sort of originates, then it's going to get lost to the West. Because as you say, the youth culture now, they want vape pens, they want shatter, they want extracts of 15 varieties. They've grown up in such a world of a kid in a candy shop when we'd be happy to find a sweet on the street.
Yeah. I was going to say something.
It's obviously good hash that you're smoking on today.
Well, I was smoking the best. I always say that. People often ask me, what's your best joint? And I always say the one I'm smoking right now, because other ones are just future dreams and past memories. But this one is the one that's real.
Wow. That's a wonderful philosophy. I really like that. I like that.
It's true when you think about it. You know, you can dream about great joints you had and dream about ones that you're going to get, but well, you're either stuck with it or you're glad to have it. One way or another, it's what there is. So
Yep.
Better be good.
That's a very quite stoic philosophy, and also a reminder to make sure you're always smoking the best thing you can.
Yeah.
Looking at my notes, I've got a new configuration of the office, so I can't actually read the bottom of my notes behind my monitor there. Where would be the ideal location for a Dabadoo event? Like, where is a country or a region that you just would love to host a Dabadoo event?
Well, I would definitely be in South America, because there, once you're off the beaten track, you're really off the beaten track and nobody's going to find you. And sometimes, because the locations are so nice, some of them continue for like a week or 3 days. And people really get to know each other and have bonfires at night, and friendships build up. And you will find in these South American ones that a third of the guys are the same, the ones that show up in Mexico as they do in, what's it called? Costa Rica. And so real friendships are made. And I was comparing Dabadoo with like a good winery, because you have like 20 kinds of really good wine and you invite 100 people and you know they're going to have a good time. And it's the same here. Plus that 10% of the people coming are bringing some of their own to share with your friends or a new friend. And so they become really quite close-knit groups of people. Yeah.
I think it is a testament to the culture that you create at these events, that people are willing to travel so far to go to each event. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it is. I really wonder at that. I'm getting used to it now, but it's not like I'm young and gorgeous. That's people want to come to my parties.
I think to just,
I think they have a good time. Yeah.
Well, definitely, as you said, the friendships that could be made, and to just sort of, I mean, I've been kind of in awe of you since we sat down, of just how much experience, knowledge that you sort of have in this, and of how, like I said, I'm still a bit overwhelmed with the realization that you were consuming cannabis before globally there was a war on drugs. Really, it's still kind of blowing my mind a bit. Well, I do hope that you get to consume it globally when the war is over, because this shit's got to stop, man. Because I mean, I'm only 34, and with all love being to the world and all being well, I don't want to be fighting this in my 70s.
Yeah. Well, inshallah, let's hope so.
Yeah.
I believe so. One day it's going to happen.
I think, it's an inevitability now, really, isn't it? It's not a case of if. I think the work of a generation of individuals like yourself have kind of solidified that and passed on the baton and the torch to my generation and the generation below to, keep pushing forward and to just kind of never be too complacent with things, to always be looking for the next concession, the next win back against, these misuse of drugs acts, these regulations against human nature.
Yeah, and I always think if you don't do it yourself, it ain't going to happen. So just go out and do it, whatever it is you're dreaming of. Yeah.
Exactly that. I read that as I think it might have again been that Sensi Seeds piece, which I'll make a note of to share in the comments below. When you want about starting your business and how you just got going with things, and you just do it. It's not as scary as you think. And I thought that was quite like, no, that's true. That's something I've found with any work that I've done. I've always been terrified of the thing, but then I've done it. I've gone, why was I so scared of that?
Yeah. No, just try it out, and whatever you're going to learn from it. And sometimes that can be even more useful.
Exactly that. What is it? I can't remember who the quote is attributed to, but I think it's Dalai Lama. He says, sometimes not getting what you want is a stroke of good luck. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Did you get a hold of my book or not? Because then I should send you one.
Oh, that would be awesome. I haven't unfortunately had an opportunity. My budget for books kind of ran out last year, and then I'm in a kind of between housing at the minute. So that would be wonderful. I would love to read all about your journey.
Just send me your address and I'll get one over to you.
Oh, perfect. Lovely. Thank you very much. Well, I suppose this leads us on quite well to the documentary, which was, again, so well put together, the visuals. Again, I only was able to see a small part of it at the London Cannabis Film Festival. But yeah, the visual of it was wonderful against the backdrop of the mountains. Can you tell us about the sort of journey of creating the documentary?
Yeah. That my ex-husband used to be a photographer, so then we got him a camera, and at that time we were living in India, and we used to go trekking. So he filmed that one year, and that just was amazing. The footage we got from it was really fantastic.
Wow. So there's a couple of other things I wanted to actually ask you about your museum. How did that sort of come about?
Just because we had extra space, and during Corona we had not much to do, so I decided to turn it into a nice space. And yeah, that's what it's become. We have different sections. Man, I'm trying to see. I'm going to be in London, and I'm trying to see when the hell is that. Oh, maybe it's not till July.
You'll have to let me know when, and we'll see if we can bump into each other somewhere.
Yeah. I don't see it written in July either. I don't know. I'm going to have to let you go. I'm going to let you know.
No worries. Yeah, please do. I think I am down to the last 3 questions here.
Okay, then.
This one might be a bit contentious and controversial, but Which country do you think produces the best hash?
Oh, man. Well, traditionally, it used to be Afghanistan. And I don't know, now it's not really bound to a country anymore. Because the techniques are known everywhere. So I could tell you America, because I certainly do a lot there. Anyway, I'm going to be in May in London on the 25th.
Okay.
There's some London awards. And their ceremony is on the 28th. And I think it has to do with CBD, if I remember right.
Yeah, I think it's the CBD Awards.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Cool.
So what I'm doing there, I don't quite know. But anyway, I'll be there.
Excellent. I'm sure many of us Brits will relish at the opportunity to say hello to you while you're down.
Yeah.
Okay. So I suppose you answered this question actually earlier. I was going to ask your favorite extraction method. You said that you were sort of impartial towards isolator.
Yes, I am. A well-made isolator beats everything as far as I'm concerned. Well, with any hash, of course, the genetics is the basic starting point. But if you have good genetics and you do it well, then there's nothing that beats that. Yeah.
True. I would agree with that. I do hope hash starts to make a comeback. So maybe while you're in London in May, hopefully you can kick our community up the arse a bit so we can see a bit more hash here in the UK, because we're just not seeing it, frankly. Or maybe I'm looking in the wrong places. Do let me know in the comments below, folks, if you believe that I'm looking in the wrong places.
I don't know. Yeah, I'll have a think. Well, I don't really know much about it. Yeah.
Okay, I've got my two playful questions, really. This was just something that came up coincidentally in a search engine when I was looking and searching your name. Have you heard of an animated TV show on Netflix called Big Mouth?
No.
It's quite sort of crude. It's children going through puberty, and it's sort of their experiences of schooling and whatever else, and it's kind of the awkward embarrassingness of what it is to go through puberty and the realization of having a sexual.
Write it down. Big Mouth. Big
Mouth. I'm not sure it'll be sort of your cup of tea, but it's the reason I bring it up is one of the characters is they're Dutch twins, and one of them is called Mila Jansen.
Is it?
Yes.
Oh, wow. I will have a look. Seeing what they made of it.
Yeah, so it's just, there you go. I'm pointing away. I do look forward to in the future getting a message at some point and hearing what you think of that series.
And does she have anything to do with hash at all, or no?
No, unfortunately not. I think it's just in name only. But I thought that it was quite a coincidence that she was part of a Dutch twins and called Mila Jansen. Yes. So maybe that is a nod in some way.
Okay, I'll go check it out. I'll let you know if I find it.
Please do. And I suppose my final question is the same question I ask all my guests now, which is, what does the future hold for you?
The future holds for me that I dream of building my own house according to my own ideas. It'll be a bungalow. I don't want stairs in my house no more. And I want to build it with wood, concrete, and loam on the inside. And I would have a fair piece of land around it, preferably with hedgerows and fruit trees, and some beehives and wildflower patches. Yeah, that's where I hope I'm heading.
Sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
That sounds lush. I do hope. I wish you all the best and good luck in that. But do hope that in the meantime, we can get you back in the not too distant future and cover sort of, I guess, more of your life and of your story, because I feel like we've only just scratched the surface here.
No, we went through quite a bit, but send me your address and I'll send you a book.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
For the rest, I just want to say I really enjoyed talking to you. It's been a lot of fun. To all them listeners, man, I love you.
Beautiful. A wonderful way to end this. I'll let you sign off now, and I'll stay here and do some housekeeping rather.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Mila. As you say, it's been a pleasure, and we'll talk more through messaging later on. But yeah, thank you very much for making the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. All the best.
Bye.
Sweet. There we go. That was Mila Jansen. Wow. Wow. The experiences of that woman, man, couldn't fit into a 10-hour podcast, I believe. Do look forward to getting an opportunity to read through her book. Like I said, we'll include links below where you guys can check out the book and the documentary as well, and to the museum and a few of the other things that we discussed, the 70 Seeds article. And yeah, I think I'm learning how to put images in now. So we'll try and include some of the images of the pollinator, the isolator, and somebody tell me the third one. Got it in my notes. Isolator, pollinator, bubblinator. There we go. Bubblinator. My pronunciation there sucks. Anyway, it's been a pleasure, folks. Thank you very much. If you enjoyed this, do check us out on patreon.com/Simpa Life, where for less than a cup of coffee a week, you can help me keep the lights on, help me pay the bills, and ensure that we keep rocking and rolling with some kick-ass new guests. Next week, we do have coming up for you, we have Neil Woods. We're going to be touching base on the police crime court sentencing bill, immigration bill, and generally just touching base on what the hell is happening with prohibition of cannabis and drugs and policing in this country. No doubt we'll be touching base on, I imagine, Partygate and a few of those other sort of scandals where the police have been shown to be either incompetent or corrupt or, well, insert your own euphemism term here. Anyway, it's been a pleasure, folks. Peace and love. Check us out on all social media platforms and give us a follow, a like, a share. And hopefully this one will have all of the audio, and we will have fixed episode 75's audio at this point. I have tried re-rendering. I have tried editing. I have tried playing around with it. And for some reason, we just can't seem to get it right. Fingers crossed, folks. Peace and love.